Good evening. I am Finn Bell, poet from the San Francisco Bay Area, and you have just entered the Poets Lighthouse with me. In our virtual studio today, we are fortunate to have another amazing guest, poet and spoken word performer, Anne Holloway. Anne uses straightforward language. Hello! Oh, how's it going? Wonderful. I love the background. I know I said that already. So, folks, Anne Holloway uses straightforward language to share stories, evoke memories, and prompt an emotional response, creating snapshots of our lives. She has performed at festivals and poetry events across the UK and has written commissions for Nonsuch Theatre and Nottingham UNESCO City of Literature. Her first collection, There Are No Photographs, was published in 2018 and was described to be a book that contains the growth and grit of life with great beauty. Anne was featured on Henry Normal's New Poetry Society, which, by the way, I love that show, and is the founder of Big White Shed, former co-director of Mouthy Poets, and was recently appointed as creative director of Nottingham Poetry Festival. She works with a wider community to promote poetry and the power of words to improve mental well-being and increase confidence, believing that we are all poets. Anne, I'm so happy to have you in the studio with me today.
Hi, that's amazing. Thank you. When you say all that about me, I'm a bit embarrassed.
I hear that is a very English thing about like having the feeling a little bashful about hearing all these accolades about yourself because we Americans tend to kind of roll around in them. It's a little much. Anne, what I think excited me most about when I was viewing your poetry and various works was this inception and idea of a Poet Lives Here project. That this is your inspired brainchild that came out of lockdown. So, in my area, what happened was we had this idea of boosting morale by drawing on the sidewalk pictures, quotes, inspirational writings, um, putting teddy bears in our windows. And, this really helped people, as they pass by our houses. How did the idea of doing this chalkboard on the side of the home. And how did that come about? And what impact did it have on your local community?
I think we've all been through the stages of grief, haven't we,
Mm,
during the pandemic? And I think it happened so suddenly here. And there were a lot of poetry events that were already booked into the schedule the plug was pulled overnight. And I was raging for a moment, actually, raging about the feeling of being trapped at home, not being able to work, not being able to perform.
I can
And
imagine.
I felt like I think I realized then that the most important part of the process of being a poet was the connections that I have with
Mm-hmm.
other people, far more than sitting at home scribbling in a notebook. And so, in a fit of sort of peak, really, I decided I would paint a chalkboard on the side of the shed at the bottom of my garden. Um, and I knew I had this tin of blackboard paint. So I went rummaging around in the kitchen under the sink and I found it and I painted it. It's a kind of nice straight boards on the end.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite easy to just paint them in. Um, and thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to write my poems on the side of the shed. And I think initially I thought maybe I'd do one a day, but that's quite some effort to come up with
Yes.
the right kind of poem. And
Yes.
initially it was just for me to put them somewhere where someone could see them or read them. And I love Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I record lots of things that I see during the day and post them on Instagram. And so I posted a picture on there of the shed with a poem on, and people started picking up on it. So there were obviously people who were following me on Instagram anyway who engaged with it, but then more excitingly, people mentioned it on their feed and tagged us to say that they've been doing we have this thing where you were allowed to go out for one piece of exercise a day. So people would go on a walk and walk past my house and then would go, oh, wow, look at that. There's a poem on the side of a shed. And that was a great feeling of connection for me.
Absolutely, and given that you did put it, this is a good example. Social media isn't always 100% great. We're still trying to figure it out, but that is a really good example of it using its power positively and actually reaching a wider community. Because not only did it reach locally, it we see it now here. Anybody who is tuned in, who actually is following your Instagram account, sees that, and those beautiful images, they brought me light seeing them for the first time, seeing the video, seeing the photos. So I appreciate it. I thank you on behalf of everybody else who was inspired by it and who passed it along. So, unfortunately, we must go on break, my dear viewers, but when we return, we will continue this lovely conversation with Anne. We are thrilled to return from our break and continue this wonderful chat with our guest today, Creative Director of Nottingham Poetry Festival, Anne Holloway. As it is something of a tradition here in the Poets Lighthouse, we beg our gracious guests to share a particular favorite poem of theirs with us. So tonight we have Anne treating us to her original poem, Hearing Distance.
Thank you. So, this is a poem I haven't shared for quite a long while, so I'm really enjoying the fact I'm having the opportunity to do so. Hearing Distance. Searching for a place we could hear each other, we left the city, found a fishing village where no one fishes except children in Wellington boots, crab lines baited with bacon. There is no quiet. The bin truck passes our window each morning, and all through the day and at night, screeching gulls shout and swear at us or each other. We're not sure. I wish the gravelled yard at the back of the house was concrete so we could sweep it clean of the debris dropped by those gulls. We have more peace in the city. Bare-chested in the afternoon sun, he shaves graphite and wood from a pencil, says, "This is how it will be when we're old. Me whittling on the porch, you watching the sky." Today we drove onto the moors, parked the car and walked through the heather. Not a sound except us chatting. We talked about teens streaking through the landscape, whooping and yelling to fill up the space with our voices. A large cloud muffled the sun. Wind ruffled the scrub's purple hair. So we kept our clothes on.
Thank you. That reached to some place in my mind or my memory that was a little melancholic, I guess you could say. So in this poem, Hearing Distance, and this one line stands starkly on its own for me. There is no quiet. There are moments in this poem that I feel the desire to escape to a silence and a solitude. But also within that setting, there is, I hope, this need to recreate or relive moments that are lost to the present time. Why do you think that with our past or with our youth, which is full of vibrancy, and movement and sound, that we retreat or we revisit these moments of silence?
Oh wow, you're fantastic, Finn. You really are. You've just got it.
Oh,
Absolutely, just got it. I think it's because the noise isn't really volume. The noise isn't really the world around us. I think the noise is in my head. I think the noise is the shouting and the banging around of all that stuff that
mm,
occupies the space in my head. And the
that
reason
makes
that
sense.
we hark back to childhood, I think, is that there was it was just clear and empty of all of the weight that it's like you fill up as the years go by. It fills up with more and more stuff. We let more and more
Mm-hmm.
stuff go in. Like, sometimes with kids, they're so engrossed in something, and you
Yes.
call them and they don't hear you. I remember my youngest son. We actually took him for a hearing test because we thought he had a hearing problem. Because
Oh,
often we would speak to him, and there was nothing there, and it wasn't that at all. It was because he was so engrossed in what he was doing.
yeah. And it's funny how we, it's like something in the universe is playing a trick on us. We need more as we get older to be able to focus on things, as they like to say nowadays, adulting. And we now, have less of that faculty, that ability to single-mindedly focus on these things that we had when we were in our youth. So it's funny how the two things shift, that you become more in need of it and it escapes you. And you're right about it being, about you expressing it being in our head, wanting to find the silence, because it does get more busy as we have things pile on and we just want the away time. So that's a perfect way to describe that. Thank you for that, Anne.
And I'm laughing at the bin truck reversing in
In
outside
my
the window.
Yes, right. I know it's the perfect backdrop for that. Yes, I know. It happens. So I don't know. I need to schedule a day that I'm doing my show, that it's not when the bin truck is passing by. I know I love to schedule it when it's trash day for us. It's lovely. So the best part of introducing you, Anne, came at the end of that introduction, when you state in your bio that you believe that we are all poets. How do you yourself personally help that belief come to fruition?
For myself or for other people.
How do you believe that you yourself help for other people to bring that to fruition? Yes.
I tell them when they're doing it. I stop and say, "Poem, you're a poet." It
Mm,
happens all the time. It happens when I'm working in schools or when I'm having conversations. I was going to say at the bus stop. I hardly ever get the bus, but those casual conversations you have when you're out and about in the world, and someone will say something or notice something, and I'll say, "Oh, poem, you're a poet." Uh, I think for a lot of people, poetry is something quite complicated and not for them.
Yeah,
And yet I believe that most of us, all of us, are able to see beauty in things. And that's what poetry is for me, finding the beauty in ordinary moments.
exactly, exactly. You know, you make me want to rewind time when I used to take a lot of public transportation, and I kind of want to go back and take a time machine and go ride the BART train. That's what we have here in the Bay Area, and approach people who I know are writing poetry. I'm like, you know, you're a poet, or people who are looking out the window, and I know that they're looking the landscape the same way as I am. They're creating this visual in their
Mm,
mind that
mm.
eventually becomes poetry, whether it be poetry in words, poetry through pictures, and say, you know, make that powerful statement: you are a poet.
I think it also lifts us out of the mundane. I mean, I've raised a family pretty
Hmm.
much on my own, and worked multiple jobs, study while working and raising kids, and
Yeah,
it's pretty mundane. You know, you're picking up dirt and filth and being buried under laundry. So
hmm,
to find those small moments are important, I think.
definitely, definitely. Those things to pull you out. That's almost like the verbal or mindset way of, you know, doing out of the box things like, you know, wearing a tiara on your head on laundry day, which by the way I do. It makes
I
things
love it.
exciting. Yeah. So you are currently the creative director for the Nottingham Poetry Festival, which I was trying to do my research. If I'm not mistaken, it's normally held yearly in November. Is that correct?
Well, it got confused by the devil that is COVID. So it's been going for 6 years now, and it
Okay.
was happening in May, and then
Hmm.
uh, COVID hit, so they flipped the dates around. So we're back to May again now.
You're back to May. So it's going to happen
May
year 2000,
2022.
2002. So what are the plans, if I may
Well,
ask?
plan number one is let's get the funding sorted. So I don't know if anyone listening is someone who has to write funding bids. It's a sort of it's a loathsome but necessary task. But also,
Yes.
if I'm being positive about it, it enables you to focus really clearly on what you want the festival to look like. Um, so that's the exciting part of it. And I think this year we really want it to be centered in the community. We
Mhm.
really want the various communities in Nottingham and the people of Nottingham to feel ownership of it, rather than us just sort of platform some highfalutin poets who fly in, deliver their show, and disappear again. We really want
Yes.
to engender a sense of connecting, and sustaining those connections between Nottingham and whoever comes to perform.
It is so funny that you brought this up, and it's so funny that two people that I interviewed prior to you were either very actively involved in their own poetry festival where they are, or they were also directors or co-directors, and they very much mirrored that that idea, that very important idea of it being about the community and centered in the community, and led by the community, which, you know, makes me think that more than ever that we really need to form this global think tank and have the poetry festivals and the festival directors, or everybody who's, you know, involved in it, to come together and mind meld, since we now have Zoom as our tool, you know, to
Mm.
do this, to say what worked for you. What, you know, I recently spoke with the head of the Bangalore Poetry Festival, and
Oh, nice.
she it was wonderful the way she described it, because the people who make the decision are truly the community of Bangalore. I thought that was brilliant. Yes, like you said, instead of bringing people from outside, you know, let's tap into our community because there's a lot of resources. And by the way, if you do find somebody who is good at, you know, the funding and writing the, you know, the grant proposals, send them our way because we need.
No, no, no. I'm keeping them for me. Thank you very much.
We need. Oh goodness. I have one last question. Ooh, yes. This is so great. When conversations are great, you lose track of time. But with the Institute of Mental Health in Nottingham, you have organized the Surviving by Storytelling project, which aims to help develop poetry as a therapeutic medium. Can you please explain to us a little about what this involves and how it is effectively serving your community or the individuals that need it?
So it's a project that I was approached 3 years ago now. They found a pot of money. The Institute of Mental Health does amazing work. They're affiliated to the University of Nottingham here in Nottingham. And they explore exactly what they say, mental health, and how they can support and develop mechanisms for support in the mental health field. So they have choirs and they have visual artists, and one strand they were following was the use of poetry to benefit better mental health. And we wanted to do something, again, we didn't want to scare people off by using that terrifying word poetry. So we decided to talk about storytelling, because there's something about the way that writing poetry and reading poetry, but in the main writing poetry, can help you unpick your own story and can help you address those sort of elements of trauma within your own story. There's something about metaphor, there's something about the use of language that enables you to approach it from a slightly different way.
Powerful.
And I've been working with a chap called Mark Pearson, who's an ex-mental health nurse, who's doing a PhD in using poetry to help survival of trauma through poetry. That's a really convoluted way of putting it, but so we've had a series of workshops in the first iteration where we took a group of people and we worked through 4 separate sessions where we looked at a narrative arc of your own story. The next iteration, we looked at the different ways that different poetry facilitators will approach going through our own stories and surviving various traumas. And we had 8 different poets there, which was really exciting to see how they facilitated a workshop. And then this time round, we've done something called a word walk, where because of COVID, a lot of the people that we're wanting to come to these workshops were quite cautious still about being indoors. So we took the workshops outdoors. We've had 2 Zoom sessions, but then we had 2 walks in the university grounds, which are beautiful. There's lakes and trees and pathways, and they were like a guided walk with writing prompts. And then at the end of that, we collected some of the work, and we're going to put it together in a printed zine.
That sounds beautiful and just like so inventive and out of the box. So, Anne, do you think that is there ever a case, or have there been cases where the effect of it or the benefit of it for people who have joined in as participants, they got so much out of it that they ended up being presenters or people who were, part of doing the workshops in turn, to help out other people further?
Well, it's been really interesting because they were open sessions. Anyone could come along, and a lot of the people who came along were practitioners. They were therapists. It was quite daunting actually in the first instance because I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I am a poet, and I always just have to say at the start of the sessions, I'm a poet. I'm not here for anything other than to facilitate getting your words out. So it was really interesting, the mix of people we had. and some of them did take the tools that we were using and use them then in their own professional practice. But we also did have patients, I suppose, for want of a better word,
Mhm.
service users from the mental health uh, services who, yeah, they did find take great comfort in what we were showing them, and yeah, some of them have gone on to lead workshops in their own right.
That's fantastic. Anne, I wanted to ask one more itsy bitsy question, because usually we like to end the segment with something fun, and both fun and informative. In the local scene in Nottingham, is there anybody up and coming poetry in the poetry scene that you would like to turn us on to?
Oh wow! Phew. Oh,
I
I've
know,
got a.
I know that that's hard, because you're like, oh, who do I say? And there's more. Um,
We were
yeah.
talking the other day about, I mean, up and coming. There's a new voice, a young lady called Cara Thompson, who is Jamaican British heritage. She has got a very exciting new voice coming through. Another young woman called Ingrid McLaren, very young, I guess probably about 20, 21 maybe now. Again, a very quite dark poetry, but very
Oh,
gentle and musical. But then there's also people like Leanne Moden, who has been working really hard for many years, and I feel is like ready to take off nationally now. Bridie Squires, who's a teammate of the Nottingham Poetry Festival team. She's Nottingham born and bred, phenomenal poet. Again, quite dark, quite funny sometimes, a very gritty poet. A young man called Joshua Judson.
mm.
Um, Blimey, I could list them all night, Finn. How long have you got? It's a hotbed, an absolute hotbed of talent here,
It
I tell you.
seems like it. Some of these names that you actually mentioned, I know you mentioned or I mentioned earlier when I was doing your bio, about Henry Normal, and I know a few of them passed through when they did the online version of his program,
Ah,
which was so incredible. I got up, I kid you not, Anne, at 4 a.m. my time to watch it, because it was so great.
wow.
It was motivating. It was a great way to start a poet's day, and
Oh, how lovely.
that's how crazy a poet I am. Anne, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. We would like for you to keep abreast, viewers, of what's going on with Anne and her projects by following her on Instagram. She is at We Be Poets, and also at Big White Shed. And on Facebook at Anne the Poet, Anne with an E, and at Big White Shed, and her web pages. There is www.anneholloway.co.uk and www.bigwhiteshed.co.uk. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels, and which is the Poetry Global Network, and follow us on Instagram and now on TikTok as well, which is both at the BGN official, and continue to show us support by watching our programming and liking and commenting on our videos. Have a lovely evening.